Welcome into Lounge, presented by DraftKings. I'm Ryan Mink here with Garrett Downing, and we are thrilled to sit down with ESPN's Mel Kiper Jr., the godfather of the mock draft and draft analysis. And nobody knows the Ravens better than Mel, especially what they're doing in the draft. So thank you for joining us, Mel. Especially, it's been a marathon for you today. How many hours straight today have you been talking about the draft?
Since 8 o'clock this morning, I think it started. And then it's been like one thing after another because we taped a lot of shows today. Field Yates, Jordan Reed, and Matt Miller and myself with Kevin Nagandi. And then I went right into different podcasts, had a media call with you, Ryan. You're part of it.
I know. I got to question it, so I appreciate the bonus time here, Mel.
No, you call me anytime. You don't have to worry about the media call. Call me anytime. We can call for an hour. But I try to do that because there's just not enough time to talk to everybody you would want to. A lot of those guys, as you know, Ryan, they're all good friends of mine. I've known them for years. So that gives us, Lily Bloom gives us that opportunity to do that. So through Lily, we're able to make that work. So it's a lot of fun. But no, tomorrow morning it'll start up again. We have a big draft meeting tomorrow.
Woo.
We're all on 7:30 tomorrow morning. We go till around 1 in the afternoon, and that's our big pre-draft. We used to do that the day before the draft. Now we do it, a couple weeks before the draft.
Yeah. Well, Mel, so this team has been knocking on the door here for a while of getting to that Super Bowl and winning another championship. In your opinion, how do they use the draft to get over the hump? Like, if you're ranking your positions of need and you say, man, they could use a first-round pick to invest in this position group, and that could help them get over the hump, where do you see that?
Yeah, I look at is it a safety? Is it a pass rusher? I always want to close out games. I'm big on that. This is what the NFL is these days. It's the end of the half. They all talk about, we're going to get the ball to start the second half. We're going to score at the end of the first half. We're going to get it right back to start the second half. And, boy, we're going to be able to come back or we're going to put you behind. We're really in trouble. We're going to put you 10, 17 points behind in a blink. So, to me, closing out the first half, closing out the second half, getting into that, every game in the NFL seems to come in midway through the fourth quarter, late in the fourth quarter. It's that one drive or two drives are going to determine your fate. So can you close it out? And to be able to get after the quarterback is so critical. And to me, you can never have enough good pass rushers. I mean, Oweh was drafted a few years ago after not having any sacks coming out of Penn State that year. We got a kid, Shamar Stewart, this year coming out of Texas A&M, has 1.5 sacks the last 3 years, each year. And then the last 3 years, the final 7 games of each year, he doesn't have a sack. But he's going to probably go in the first round.
Right.
So there's a lot of intriguing guys like that. But to answer your question, pass rusher would be front and center for me, and a safety, like maybe a Malachi Starks from Georgia.
Right. Well, you mentioned Malachi Starks, and in the latest mock, that's who you have the Ravens taking in the first round, number 27. And Ryan is a big fan of Malachi Starks. I am too. I mean, I think he fits this team in a lot of different ways. But what do you like about him, and why do you think he could be a good fit for this defense?
I love guys that have great football IQ. Those are smart football players, versatile football players, but just ballers. And Malachi Starks, to me, this past year, they moved him around. I mean, when you can just focus on one spot and one role, and he can wear a lot of hats. There's no doubt about that. But the range he shows, the ability, the tackling ability, which some people question this year, he didn't have the best year he could have had. He did not have the year he had 2 years ago. But he didn't have the interception until he had the great interception against Clemson. He didn't have that. So his career total would have been a lot higher had he had more opportunities this year. But they were moving him around. So at the end of the day, Malachi Starks, to me, you have to go back to 2023. And if you did, going into the year, guys, I had him as the 7th or 8th best player in the draft.
Wow.
And I always try to go back to that. I always try to go back to early August, mid-August, when those ratings boards start to come out and become formulated, and I finalize my opinions going into the year. Malachi Starks was right there. And one of the top 6, 7, 8 best players in this draft. So when you start talking about him in the late 20s, where the Ravens are picking, we talk about value in the draft. How do you get value? You get value either by a guy being injured, banged up, and prevented him from playing to the level of his talent, or he was misused, talent around him wasn't the same. For whatever reason, it just didn't click. It just didn't work to the level it did the previous year. In Malachi Starks' case, that was what happened. So now you can benefit from that. You don't get great value picks because the guy played great. You get great value picks because there's a question. Something went awry, whether it was injury, not playing up to the level expected, whatever. And so for Malachi Starks, if he's there at the end of the first round, I forget pass rusher. I would take Malachi Starks.
Well, the other thing, too, on safety, so there's kind of two guys that really stand out in that first round. It's Malachi Starks and Nick Emmanwori out of South Carolina. And Emmanwori is one of those guys, when we were talking after the Combine, it's like, oh, he's going to be gone because he's just got these size, speed, intangibles. And he actually talked to the Combine about how it'd be scary for the NFL if him and Kyle Hamilton were on the same defense. So I'm curious, like, for you, when you look at Emmanwori, Does he fit well, or is he too much of the mold of Kyle Hamilton? And on one hand, you can say you can't have too many Kyle Hamiltons, great player, but how would those two players work in tandem?
I've asked people in the league about that. He said, hey, have them both. Use them different ways. Put them both on that defense, and good luck. He's not going to be there, I don't think. And I'm kind of stubborn with this stuff. If I lock into, and I love Malachi Starks, so I kept him as my number one safety. You could very easily make a case for Eamon. It depends what you're looking for. Eamon is a freakish talent. Yeah, he's not Kyle Hamilton. He is not built that way. He's faster in a straight line, but he doesn't have the agility, quickness that I think that Kyle has, and the versatility that Kyle has. Eamon is a heck of a talent, and he's going to go, I think, Tampa Bay, Cincinnati. There's going to be plenty of teams in that middle of the first round area, even before the Ravens pick, that he could come off the board. That will allow Malachi to get maybe down into that general range where Baltimore's picking. But for Eamon, and then you got Kevin Winston Jr., kid out of Penn State, who unfortunately was hurt. As many players, I think the theme of this draft, unfortunately, is a lot of injured players that either couldn't finish out the year, got hurt early, or got hurt during the process, or couldn't go through the process. So he's one of those guys, and I'm pretty high on Kevin Winston Jr., the safety out of Penn State. Same thing with Xavier Watts, who had 13 interceptions over the last 2 years at Notre Dame.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned edge rushers, Mel, and, Shamar Stewart was a player that after the combine, everybody had him going in like the top 15, and now, as it tends to happen, it kind of things settle a little bit more. And as you mentioned, obviously not a lot of production in college, sack production. The Ravens have been through this with Odafe Oweh. They used a first-round pick on him. Do you think they would do that again, or do you think that would make them a little bit gun-shy maybe to take him, even though Oweh he's developed? He was a double-digit sack guy this year.
I do not think they would take Shamar Stewart. To answer your question, Ryan, no, I don't think Shamar Stewart will be a Raven. It's just because of the fact that when you watch him, I didn't see the disruptive plays. I didn't see him beating a guy initially that he should have. And I call him AOG. I kind of coined that phrase. You know what it stands for, right? Another occupation guy. And that's AOG. So most of the guys you play against in college, I call them AOGs.
Yeah.
And if you can't beat them, you're playing against the best in the world when you get to the NFL on a play-by-play basis, even if it's a backup. These are the best in the world playing in the NFL. These are AOGs, okay? So if you can't beat them, all of a sudden it's going to click in the NFL. So to answer your question, I think Shamar Stewart, a defensive line coach will probably fight for him, say, I can take him. Mm-hmm. I can make him. If you're taking him in the first round, you better be thinking 10 to 12 sacks a year. That's what Oweh finally got to that point this year, right? You got to be thinking first round pass rusher, I got to be getting double-digit sacks out of this guy. If I can't get that, am I going to take him? Look at Trey Hendrickson. What's he getting, 17 a year? He was, a third-round draft choice.
Right.
So now Daniil Hunter didn't have many sacks at LSU. He's got 99 career sacks now. He was a fourth-round pick. So you have had outliers that have not had great sack production in college that have gone on to do it, but they're outliers. And Bill Polian told me and screamed at me, you don't draft outliers, okay? If we have a range on a wide 9 that says a wide 9's got to be 4.65 or better, we can't draft a guy at 4.71 for a 40. Right. Can't do it. So you got what's it take, guys, to be able to do? You got to have discipline. Part of being a great evaluator is being disciplined in your approach and not letting something happen and say, well, I'm going to make an exception to the rule. I'm going to do something away from what I normally would do, and I'm going to take a shot on this guy. Well, I guess you could do it once in a while. Can't make a living doing that. So if teams that say, hey, production, the final 7 games of the last 3 years at Texas A&M, he did not record a sack. That's the final 7 games of 3 straight years. 1.5. 3 years ago, 1.5. 2 years ago, 1.5 this year. That's 4.5 sacks in his career. Those guys had 4.5 sacks in a game this year. Mm-hmm. Okay? So to me, I couldn't do it myself. He's graded at a point where I have him on the board, that 25 to 28 area that I know he's going to go higher. And I've always believed if you're picking where the Ravens are, you got to get a guy on your board that's in the top 15. Mm-hmm. It's going to work that way. You're going to get a guy that's on your board, one of the best 15 players in this draft. So it's not going to be Shamar Stewart. For me, no. Now, somebody else going to take Shamar? I think they will, because I think a defensive line coach is going to look at that talent. They're going to find some plays. You can always, cherry pick plays. Mm-hmm. You can always do it. I can find any player and find you good plays and bad plays. And I'll convince you he's good. I can convince you he's bad. So if you can find those plays with Shamar Stewart, and you can, a defensive line coach can say, I can make that a consistent thing. And somebody's going to believe in that D-line coach enough, or that GM, or that whatever it is that makes that determination. Somebody's going to take that kid, and then he's a good test case. I always say these are good test cases. When you have guys like Owe, you have guys like Hunter, that don't have the great sack production, but what do they do once they're in the NFL? Do they flourish? Do they prosper? We'll see.
Now, Mel, a guy who kind of screams Raven to me is Michael Williams of Georgia. And here's a guy who's big, physical, beats up tight ends. He can set the edge. He's got athletic ability to rush the passer. But the ankle injury this past season really kind of limited him and could result in him sliding. What do you think of Michael Williams? Is he a player, if he's there at 27, that the Ravens turn the card in?
That's dependent upon if he's there. Would they turn the card in? Maybe. I would have loved to have seen him go through the year healthy. He wasn't with the ankle. Do you see the burst? Do you see the explosiveness? To me, he's got to develop some more pass rush moves. He's great against the run. He's great at the point. He can steal the edge. He can do all those things. He hustles. He plays hard. He looks the part. From that size standpoint out there on that football field, I thought going into the year, he or James Pierce Jr. may be in line to be one of the top picks in the draft, and neither, because James Pierce Jr. didn't produce to the level expected, and Michael Williams had the injury. Now, what he played through, I give him credit for, because Kirby Smart said it. A lot of kids would shut it down. He didn't. He played through that injury, and he was out there gutting it out, knowing he wasn't 100% or even close to it. So give him total credit for that. But, he's a borderline, I'd say, 20s, 17 Cincinnati into the late first. That's where I have him going right now. So would it be automatic, to answer your question, guys, that it would be Michael Williams based on grade? Where's Mike Green? Is Mike Green around at that point coming out of Marshall? Because he would be a guy that would have to be in the discussion if he were around. I don't think he will be. I got him going to Atlanta. But say a Mike Green's there. I'll give you another name. Donovan Ezaraku from Boston College is an edge rusher. Doesn't play the run great like Michael Williams does, but he's a better natural pass rusher.
Right.
Olufemi Oladejo from UCLA is a heck of a football player. He's gotten more publicity now as we move through the process, and I think he should have gotten this publicity during the year because he had a great season at UCLA. And by the way, his teammate Carson Schlesinger, phenomenal player. He's in the late first-round mix, at worst early second. So both those UCLA kids haven't been discussed much at all. Schlesinger's gotten more publicity than Oladejo. I had Oladejo in the mock first round, a couple in mock 2.0, I think. People were laughing at it. Where'd you get that name? Nobody. Well, guess what? People are now talking about Olufemi Oladejo as maybe a late one, early two. So I have him going to Tennessee in the early second. This kid, after moving off ball to outside, just like happened with Abdul Carter, wreaked havoc. And he tested well. And he's got length, and I'm big into length. So, those two UCLA kids, Schlesinger and Oladejo, keep an eye on them as well.
Well, you mentioned Schlesinger, and the report came out this week that he was visiting the Ravens, and could he be a fit there next to Roquan Smith and having those two guys kind of in the middle of the defense there? What's your take on the possibility of the Ravens using a first-round pick on an inside linebacker, whether him or if it's Shahad Campbell, if he were to fall to the Ravens, like an inside linebacker first-round pick? Would that make sense for this defense?
Well, you think about the Ravens. It just wasn't Ray Lewis, right? It was Patrick Queen. Right? Patrick Queen. Remember that year? Remember Murray was coming out that same year. They were both in the mix. Murray went to the Chargers. Worked out better with Patrick Queen here in Baltimore. Made the big deal to get Roquan Smith. Drafted Simpson. Simpson was a former running back. Remember? He's just still developing the instincts and just the feel for the position. Certainly now we've got a new linebacker coach, new inside linebacker coach as well with the Ravens coming in. Schlesinger this year played at an elite level. Now, he was a former walk-on. He didn't do it even at the start of the season. It took him, 3 games in, and he was all over the field. When you watch UCLA, I had to look, who is that guy? Okay, who is he? Because he wasn't on the list of guys to be watching that closely, but he started popping in every game. Double-digit sacks, impactful. Oladejo was a guy I was watching, but I'm watching Schlesinger. I'm watching him again. All of a sudden, he's flying to the football. He's showing great range. He's showing versatility. He's making play after play after play. So, yeah, to answer your question, he would have to be in the mix for the kind of year he had. I mean, he had like 41.5 vertical, I believe.
Right. Yeah. Mel, I want to back up real quick to Ezaraku that you mentioned because you said of that cluster, you really like Donovan Ezaraku from Boston College. Do you think he's too small to be a Raven? Like, they typically go for those bigger outside linebackers.
They do, and he's about 247, 6'2.5", 247. But one thing he's got, guys, and you got to have it when you're that size, he's got great length.
Yeah, okay.
So and I'm big into long arms at every position. Now, quarterback doesn't matter, right? But you got to have length. And when the offensive line, D-line, linebacker, secondary, wide receiver. I love length. That's not the end-all, be-all, but the longer the better. In some positions, it is the end-all, be-all. So certainly that comes into play. The bend as well. Spoke to an offensive line coach, tight end coach this week. The bend, the ability to really wreak havoc and get into the mind of the tackle you're going up against. If you have that, I call it like the speed skaters, right? The ability of to be able to have that bend, they have it. And Ezaraku has that. And the closing ability, once you say, can you close like a cat? He can do that. Then do you have the attitude, the approach to be just a play like a Raven guy? Ezaraku has that. So, yes, while he's not 265 pounds, he's not that kind of guy. He's 247. He's not 6'4", 6'5" either. Right. He plays like a Raven. Now, is that, are you going to sacrifice a little in the run game? Yes, you will. Could he get swallowed up? Will he be handled in the run game? Will he steal the edge? Will he do all those things? That's the mystery moving forward to the NFL. He's a great kid. They raved about him at Boston College, and the production matched the talent. And when the production matches the talent, you got something. That's why I was surprised even during the year. We're always talking about, hey, Mike Green had a great year at Marshall. No touchdown. The talent, the production was there. But we're all talking about Pierce. We're talking about Michael Williams and all these other. How about Donovan Ezaraku? He's getting it done. He went to the Senior Bowl, and he had a tough time blocking them down there. So, yes, I do think he's in the mix for the late first round. Do I think he'll be a Raven? I'm with you on that. Maybe not. But somebody's going to take him. Right. Whether it's late first, it's going to be no worse than the early second round.
Well, Elvis Dumerville was a shorter pass rusher. He had a lot of success here in Baltimore. So maybe
Dwight Freeney was one of the all-time greats, and Jonathan Ogden couldn't block Dwight Freeney. Freeney, with that size, made it tough on those taller offensive tackles. So, again, I think that's going to work in Donovan Ezraku's favor as well because his bend, and I'll tell you what, he's got the want to as well, and then he's got the long arms for his size. All bodes well for this kid being a double-digit sack guy in the NFL.
So, Mel, I want to talk about defensive linemen because that's certainly a position of need for the Ravens to get more depth there. And, hey, they were interested reportedly in bringing back Calais Campbell. Is there, I know Calais Campbell's a freak, in that defensive penetrating defensive end / D tackle mold that you feel like will be a good fit here in Baltimore?
I'll tell you, the guy, Derek Harmon's interesting. Derek Harmon at Oregon is a guy I have going to Pittsburgh because I think he could learn from Cameron Hayward. I love what he did at Oregon this year. At Michigan State, he was just okay, but he took his game to another level. He tested great. He's got length, and he's got a great attitude and a great approach. So I like kids that want to work hard, and they're all about being professional and that's how you end up playing into your late 30s at that position. Calais Campbell. By the way, he wasn't a first-round pick. He was a second-round pick. Cam Hayward wasn't the top 10 to 15 pick in the first round. Wasn't the first round. Didn't go top 10 to 15. So these are guys who were kind of pushed down a little bit. And look what happened. Here they are playing, when you thought there's no way. And Miami won him back. Now he's back in Arizona, Calais Campbell, right? Cam Hayward's got another deal going where he's going to be there, and here's the kid could learn from him there. I'll tell you, the interesting guy, too, is Walter Nolan from Ole Miss. What do you do? Where does he fit into a defensive line scheme? I think he's scheme versatile. I know he's disruptive. I know he plays hard. And I know he had a heck of a year at Ole Miss after going to A&M as the number one player coming out of high school football. But I think teams are a little bit kind of, I wouldn't say up at the figure, trying to figure it out. I've heard opinions all over the place. Some think he could go 10-11 in the first round. I got him in the early second because that's what you hear, kind of the buzz is. Late first, early second. But Walter Nolan's a good football player. Make no mistake about it. When he's on that football field, what did the late, great Al Davis say? Sunday. It's all about Sunday. Playing on Sundays. Just win, baby. Play on Sunday. And on Sunday, Walter Nolan will show up, and he'll play big for you.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. Defensive line is one of those, I guess, needs for the Ravens that maybe flies under the radar a little bit, but would not surprise me if they addressed it early. And you have Walter Nolan and Derek Harmon who could maybe be there in the first, but it sounds like you've got Harmon ahead of him. That you got Harmon ahead of those at the top of the order there for those two guys that would maybe make more sense
and be a better fit for Baltimore.
And be a better fit, yeah.
What's going to really be interesting, guys, and it impacts the Ravens. I brought this up. What impacts even that type of situation with Harmon is where does Shedeur Sanders go? Because we're sitting here in Baltimore. I'm a Raven fan. You're all Raven fans. Love the Ravens, right? Do we want Shedeur Sanders in Pittsburgh? I don't. Okay? Because Shedeur's a winner, and he will find a way to get the ball to those receivers. This notion you can't play in Pittsburgh if you're Shedeur. Well, Brady played in New England and didn't have the great arm and didn't have any speed. Brady ran a 5.2 4.40 and had 24 vertical. That's the worst vertical and the worst 40 of any quarterback I've ever evaluated. Okay? The all-time greatest quarterback, Johnny Unitas, will always be number one on my list. I still have John Elway, as you guys know. Love John Elway. We're up despite the fact he didn't come to Baltimore. Okay? I didn't hold that against him. You talk about where we are right now in terms of Shedeur Sanders. Could he be there with the Pittsburgh Steelers pick at 21? Could he fall in their lap? Ben Roethlisberger fell in their lap after Rivers and Eli went early, right?
Mm-hmm.
Look how that worked out. Ben Roethlisberger fell in their lap. Will same thing happen with Shedeur Sanders? I don't think they'll take Jackson Dart. If Shadeur's gone, I've been told not for Jackson Dart because it may be a little too much Kenny Pickett there, right? Not enough upside, whatever you want to talk about there.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think Tyler Shuck's going that high either. Don't think it'll be Jalen Milroe necessarily, but Jalen Milroe's intriguing. If he can fix that accuracy, you got a special player. If he can't, he'll just be a guy who'll have packages because he's a great runner, and he'll never be a successful starting quarterback. So you got to roll the dice on Milroe that, he can be accurate, something he was not the latter half of this season, really the last 3 quarters of this past season.
So if we're watching the draft on the first night, and you hear Shedeur Sanders go in the top 10, one of those teams takes him early, we're going to get a big round of applause from you on the ESPN desk there?
Well, I'll be very, very satisfied that it's not going to impact the Ravens negatively, and the Steelers won't get the quarterback I would think they would want to see slide down that far. I don't have a problem with Tyler Shuck going there. Don't have a problem with Jackson Dart going there. Wouldn't have a problem with Jalen Milroe going there. But I don't want to see Shedeur in a Pittsburgh Steelers uniform. And that could happen. That'll be our worst nightmare if that starts to happen. Maybe somebody will try to jump ahead of them and grab him. I don't know. I don't know what New Orleans is going to do at 9. They could take him. They could take Dart. They could not even take a quarterback. Okay? There are some that think they're not going to go quarterback. That's not going to happen. I think they could. Kellen Moore handpicked his quarterback. If he likes one of the two, take him. We'll see. Shedeur's not probably going to go to the Giants. We know that now, right? He's not going anywhere past New Orleans. Where's he going to go? Then you get into no man's land. If it's not the Steelers, the Rams, now I keep hearing maybe the Rams won't take a quarterback. Will somebody else trade back in? Well, you know what happens here? Now, Pittsburgh doesn't get a quarterback. Pittsburgh has no 2.
Can they forfeit their first-round pick, too? That's really the dream scenario. They lose their first-round pick also.
What they're going to do, they can't do is try to – moving up won't be – now, you could always give up picks next year. But to go up from 21 without the second-round pick that they traded to Seattle for DK Metcalf, they're a little hamstrung there now because you normally give up the 2, you move up, you throw another pick. You have to go by the Jimmy Johnson chart, right? But now, all of a sudden, with no 2, what do they do? Are they going to sit at 21? Is somebody else like the Giants? They're not going to take Shedeur. Do they feel the need to go up and get Shedeur?
Mm-hmm.
Does Cleveland? Does somebody else feel the need to go up and get Shedeur, or does he, like I say, just fall down to Pittsburgh? That's going to be the story of the first round. Mm-hmm. Aaron Rodgers started to slide, and Green Bay just waited it out.
Well, Lamar Jackson. How about Lamar Jackson?
Boomer Esiason, guys, ranked the 3rd best player in the draft my first year at ESPN in 1984. They had 3 picks in the first round, did not take Boomer. They took him in the second round. The 3rd player on the board went in the second round. Favre was 14, went in the second round. Okay? It's happened before. It can happen again. Mm-hmm. So there's a chance that Shedeur could be there at 21.
It's interesting. Well, last one here for you, Mel, before we let you leave. One of my favorite things is I love always hearing some guys that I've never heard of. These guys I've never heard of. And so recently talked with Steve Bisciotti and John Harbaugh, and they said they were talking about wide receivers who are like late round, undrafted type guys. And they were like, hey, I like him and you like him too. So who's the receiver they're talking about, Mel? Who's this receiver that's going to go in the 6th, 7th undrafted range that we could be talking about here in Baltimore?
Well, there's a couple guys. I got the list here. I went through this because the Blaine Taylor at Abilene Christian's one. Because we're actually doing a segment on this coming up this week on ESPN, which is all sleepers and guys down the line. And I look at wide receivers, and you want small college guys, not major. And there's a lot of I always had a segment in my draft report which was major college sleepers. Because there is such a thing as a major college sleeper. Guys, there's like a Jawan Newton at Toledo, very under the radar. But Efton Chisholm III at Eastern Washington, I like the way he played this year. I like that kid as a late-round priority free agent. There's a kid Holden Willis at Middle Tennessee State as a late rounder. Darius Cooper at Tarleton State's another one. Blaine Taylor at Abilene Christian. Chandler Brayboy at Elon's another one that could be. The Gibson kid at Arkansas Pine Bluff. So those are guys from the smaller schools. But from the major schools that are under the radar guys that I personally have a better grade on than some people do, I'll give you some of those names. There's a kid, Torrey Horton at Colorado State, got hurt. Was playing really well until he got hurt. He could drop down to a point in the draft where he becomes an interesting pick. DK, the kid at Florida, was at Wisconsin. Tested well. He can be a gunner on special teams. He can help you in the punt return game. As a 3rd, 4th receiver, watch out for him. Another kid, I think, Jimmy Horn Jr. At Colorado. Nice player. And if he gets pushed into day 3, he could be a good one. I like what I saw Rock Taylor at Memphis. Nobody's talked about him at all. Daniel Jackson at Minnesota is another one, was productive. There's a lot of those guys that I look at in the later rounds from the major college ranks. They're going to slip through the cracks that are going to be, like I say, either late rounders or priority free agents, but they're going to have a chance to play in the league. So I always wonder where's the DK kid from Florida going to come off the board? Is it going to be 3rd round or is it going to be 5th round? If you can get him in the 5th round, you got yourself a heck of a value pick. 3rd round, maybe a little rich, right? But 5th round's good. So when George Young, late great George Young, Calvert Hall's own, right? George Young told me, and I got the handwritten letters George used to write me when he got the draft report. He said, Mel, when you buy is just as important as who you select. George was big into value. He was big into trying to figure out, if we get this guy in the 5th round, I like it a lot better than the 3rd or 4th round. So he was big into when you buy is just as important as who you select. And I've taken that little phrase throughout my career at ESPN because it really is true. When if this guy, it protects you against bust. That's why you do this board, because it protects you against reaching. It will protect you against some guys who went earlier than they should have. You take guys, you put those guys. Carl Pearson always said, we go through this exercise for a reason, guys. Let's stay true to our board. Let's not deviate from our board. We do this for a reason. And it comes true. It stands true. The test of time. It's withstood the test of time. We put that board up for a reason. Just be disciplined in your approach and stay true to your board.
That sounds like Eric DeCosta's
Yeah, that sounds
approach.
like Eric. Exactly.
He's a bargain hunter.
Well, you got to be. Hey, I loved it a few years ago when Eric had all those 4th-round picks. I was loving it.
Yeah.
We're at ESPN. We're drafting a punter stout, right? We're getting everybody. Isaiah Likely. I always used to do this when I was, long before I started ESPN. I always free teams. I'd put down the picks. Well, I would move off of this pick. I'd end up with 15 draft picks. I kept trading down, and I'd have all these picks. Who could I get? And I'd go through and I'd do those little, not like a fantasy draft, but who I would have taken based on my grades, not just after the fact, but based on grades, and then see how it all played out 3 years down the road. Always tried to do that, and then like I said, Howie Roseman with the Eagles, Eric DeCosta with the Ravens, Les Snead with the Rams, Veach out in Kansas City. There's some great GMs, but I'll tell you what, the Ravens have. Hey, you can argue Howie Roseman. Howie Roseman's going to be a Hall of Fame GM. Eric DeCosta is going to be right there with him.
Awesome. I love it, Mel. Well, thank you so much for taking the time. As always, to our listeners, go check out all Mel's coverage on ESPN in his latest 2-round mock draft to see who he has coming to Baltimore.
I don't hide my Ravens love.
Yeah.
I have that daggone what anybody says. I'm Ravens all the way. I root for the Ravens. I'm hoping the Ravens. I don't have to hope. Ravens will do well on draft day. Eric and his scouts, they do a great job. And Ozzie all those years was phenomenal. So, this Raven organization, Steve Bisciotti leading the way. Couldn't be prouder of those guys. And like I said, hey, this whole family here, this Polish Catholic family, the Kiper family in Baltimore, we love the Ravens. Go Ravens. And really enjoyed it, guys. Had a great time.
Love it. Thank you, Mel.
Thank you, Mel. Welcome back into the lounge. We are coming to you from the SeatGeek studio. We also want to mention our partners at DraftKings Sportsbook. They are an official sports betting partner of the Baltimore Ravens. DraftKings Sportsbook, the crown is yours. So it's always a highlight of the year when we get a chance to talk to Mel. He's one of our favorite guys. We've done this interview with him on the pod several times over the years, and it's always a favorite day of mine. Just to get to talk to him, it's always great. Yeah,
he's a workhorse. It is pretty funny. He was holding a ESPN conference call with reporters before he came on the podcast. I was like, I can't get enough of Mel. I logged on to that too. He was gracious enough to give me a question on that as well.
You and Mel just basically hung out all day today.
I wish. That would be a dream day for me.
Yeah.
So big thank you to Mel for coming on the lounge. And, I think some really great insight. He's a Malachi Starks guy.
Yeah.
He really likes Malachi Starks and Donovan Ezaraku, the pass rusher from BC. There's those guys that are Mel guys. And, hey, he hit one of them last year. Roger Rosengarten was a Mel guy. He was really high on him, and the Ravens ended up taking him. So,
well, you have said throughout this process leading up to the draft that you feel like Malachi Starks is the player who the Ravens will draft in the first round. You're aligned with Mel Kiper on that. Both of you have the Ravens taking him. And after talking with him, does it make you feel, I guess, more confident in that?
Yeah, I think the interesting thing is that Mel says, he didn't have as good a final season because he was being moved around everywhere. Now the Ravens like to move their safeties around. Maybe the player they drafted put next to Kyle Hamilton doesn't move around. Maybe that's more of a true free safety because Kyle Hamilton has that versatility, right? But I think it's intriguing in that Malachi Starks, part of the good things about him is that he has that versatility, but Mel's saying the reason why he might slide to the Ravens is because he didn't play as well with that versatility.
Yeah, it's interesting the point that he makes in the whole conversation around versatility and also value. Like if you're getting a value, there's a reason that a guy's going to be there at 27, and maybe it's positional value, or maybe it's he was injured, or maybe didn't play as well. But like that can work to your benefit. And there's been plenty of times over the years where that has worked to the Ravens' benefit. Like when Kyle Hamilton was there at 14, a lot of people didn't think he was going to get there, but he was there probably because he played safety and didn't have
the position flexibility thing is that question mark often leads to
yes,
to value.
That's one of the questions, and from a value standpoint. So all that could lead to him being there. And if the Ravens end up, the pass rusher, we spent a lot of time talking DB and pass rusher with Mel. And like that, to me, I haven't locked it in yet. I know you have, but I'm leaning secondary. Like my gut instinct right now is secondary in the first round. That could be safety, that could be a corner, and then of course you have the defensive front as well. It's interesting, a lot of defensive talk. I mean, we're really leaning heavy on the defensive side here in the conversation for what the Ravens are going to do in the first round, maybe in the first couple rounds. It just seems defense heavy.
Yeah, I certainly, that's what I expect to happen. There are some other spots. I think tight end, running back, receiver. I think interior offensive line or tackle, guard tackle. They're going to take some offensive players, but it's going to be dominated on the defensive side.
Especially early.
Yeah,
like that's why
I can see a lot of those coming off the board day 3.
Yeah, like I would be really surprised if the Ravens ended up. I mean, you could maybe talk yourself into an offensive lineman, maybe, but I would be surprised if they addressed those other positions on the first 2 days. So, as always, we'd love to hear from you guys, the listeners and the viewers. You can email us at thelounge@ravens.nfl.net. Let us know what questions you have and let us know your thoughts on the upcoming draft. And thanks again to Mel Kiper for joining us. You can watch his coverage all throughout the draft and leading up to it on ESPN. Thanks for watching. We'll talk to you again soon.